It began not with an announcement, but with a suspicion, an unspoken tension that settled over the Forrester estate like a gathering storm. Luna, radiant and enigmatic in equal measure, had returned from her brief hiatus with a kind of glowing presence that often accompanied change. Her movements were slower, more deliberate. Her silence more profound. And though she smiled politely, there was a haunted quality in her gaze that made even Paris pause. Rumors swirled quickly in fashion circles, and by the time her condition was confirmed, the question was no longer whether Luna was pregnant, it was who the father might be. At first, the obvious assumption was RJ. Their relationship had been visible, tender, and intense. Young love nestled inside the glamour of Forrester creations. But Luna's demeanor didn't reflect the joy of shared anticipation. It suggested something more complicated, more fragile. And when she finally confessed the truth in hushed tones to Lee, her mother's expression didn't harden out of judgment, but out of dread. Because Lee, more than anyone, understood the danger of secrets carried too long. She had once hidden the existence of a child. She knew the toll it took. The name Luna, whispered, changed everything. Bill Spencer. A man of power, pride, and a dangerous charisma that often blurred the lines between charm and manipulation. He was also the father of RJ's half-brother, Will, a detail that made Luna's truth even more incendiary. Their encounter had been fleeting, impulsive, something she thought buried in the past. A moment of weakness or curiosity or rebellion, Luna herself could no longer explain. But biology did not care for intentions. Biology demanded accountability. And with a child growing inside her, the future of more than one family was quietly rearranging itself behind closed doors. Brooke, upon learning the truth through whispered channels, felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had fought hard for her family's peace. She had protected Hope, defended RJ, and even found a strange kind of truce with the Spencer men despite all their chaos. But now this? Another child born of a Spencer-Forrester entanglement? Another chapter where love and legacy were on a collision course? It wasn't just messy. It was war waiting to happen. Luna's confession to RJ didn't go as expected. His love for her was real, but the betrayal cut deep. The idea that Bill, not just any man, but his father's longtime rival, the man who once hurt his mother, could be the biological father of Luna's child felt like a personal invasion. A humiliation. A strike at his identity. He stormed out, leaving Luna surrounded by silence and doubt. She didn't chase him. There was nothing to say that could make the pain more bearable. The ripple effects were immediate. Katie, still rebuilding her fragile trust in Bill, was the next to be blindsided. When she overheard Bill discussing the possibility with Justin over the phone, the facade cracked. Bill's face, when confronted, said it all. He hadn't denied it. He had already known. Katie's devastation wasn't just about the betrayal, it was about the pattern. Again and again, Bill proved incapable of living within the boundaries of fidelity. And now there was a child. A possible sibling to Will. A ticking bomb wrapped in swaddling cloth. The question of paternity loomed like a gavel. Bill demanded a test, but not with cruelty. There was something deeper in his request, a flicker of guilt, of awe, of yearning. Part of him wanted this to be true, not just for ego, but for legacy. The Spencer name, the empire he had built, the son he had raised, it all suddenly felt incomplete. The chance to guide another life, to rewrite some of his past failures, burned behind his eyes. Katie saw it too, and it broke her. Meanwhile, the Forresters held their own council. Eric, recovering but still lucid, sat quietly as Ridge, Steffi, and Brooke debated what this would mean. The company, always at the intersection of glamour and gossip, would not survive the PR disaster without scars. If Bill were the father, would he attempt to gain influence over the company through Luna? Would the child have rights? Would this cast doubt over RJ's place in the Forrester succession? Steffi, pragmatic as ever, saw danger in delay. "We need control," she had said firmly. "Legal guardianship. Custody arrangements." before the press gets wind of this. But Brooke, though equally strategic, reminded her that this was still a child. A human being, not a chess piece. Still, there was no denying what was at stake. The Forrester brand was built on names, bloodlines, and beauty. A scandal of this magnitude would alter public perception, shift investor confidence, and, above all, reshuffle internal alliances. Paris, ever loyal to Luna, tried to shield her from the swirl of corporate politics, but even she struggled to stay neutral as tension mounted. Zend, caught between admiration for Bill's ambition and disdain for his recklessness, quietly voiced support for RJ, deepening the fractures within the younger generation. Then came the paternity results. The envelope arrived like a prophecy. Luna didn't attend the reading. She was already retreating from the noise, seeking peace in nature, far from the flashing cameras and judgmental stares. Brooke opened the results first. Alone. Her breath caught. Positive. Bill Spencer was the father. She sat in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity. This truth, now confirmed, was both liberation and destruction. Luna's child would carry the Spencer name, no matter what she chose. Will would have a sibling, one he didn't ask for, born of a union his mother would see as betrayal. And RJ would never again see Luna through innocent eyes. Bill took the news with a gravity few had expected. He didn't gloat. He didn't scheme. Instead, he asked to see Luna in private. When they met, there was no performance, just a man trying, clumsily, to make sense of a future he had never envisioned. He offered support, not control. But Luna, wary and proud, made one thing clear: she would not let her child become a weapon in anyone's war. Katie, however, was already retreating. The woman who had weathered Bill's infidelities before could no longer stomach the idea of raising Will beside the child of another woman, especially one so close to her world. She packed her things in silence. Her exit was quiet but final. And for the first time in years, Bill found himself utterly alone. Not unloved, but unanchored. Luna's pregnancy became the vortex around which everything spun. Legal debates began quietly. Could Bill claim paternal rights if Luna resisted shared custody? Could the Forresters intervene to protect the child from Spencer influence? And more importantly, what legacy would this baby inherit? Fashion, media, scandal, or something different entirely? Steffi pushed for a family lawyer to secure Luna's position, arguing that the child should remain with its mother in the Forrester ecosystem, shielded from Spencer manipulation. Rich feared the headlines, the gossip, the implications for RJ. Brooke, torn between maternal instincts and moral clarity, chose instead to support Luna, not as a Forrester, but as a woman standing in the eye of a storm. As Luna's belly grew, so did the realization that this child would change everything. Will, now a teenager, reacted with a quiet rage that few expected. He had idolized his father, cherished the rare moments they spent together. But now, with another child on the horizon, a child that might receive the attention he had long craved, Will felt himself disappearing in Bill's priorities. He became distant, erratic, and eventually left to live with Katie full-time. He didn't speak to Bill for weeks. Luna, caught between past mistakes and present realities, began preparing for motherhood alone. She declined corporate endorsements. She left the runway. She returned to simpler fabrics, hand-stitching clothing that reflected a desire for purity, authenticity, and control. She didn't run from the press, she outgrew it. Her silence became her statement. Bill watched from a distance, tormented not just by regret, but by a growing recognition that power couldn't fix this. Money couldn't buy trust. And charm couldn't replace responsibility. His attempts to do right by Luna only highlighted how little control he actually had. His empire was intact. His reputation could recover. But the woman carrying his child saw him not as a savior, but as a consequence. In the final weeks of her pregnancy, Luna chose to move in with Lee. The woman who had once withheld a child from the world now became the protector of one not yet born. It was a strange kind of symmetry. And for Lee, it was redemption. For Luna, it was safety. And when the baby arrived, soft cries breaking the dawn, a new chapter began. A child with dark eyes and uncertain future. A name that carried neither Forrester nor Spencer. Just Luna's choosing. Not long after, Bill stood at a distance outside the hospital window, watching. He didn't ask to hold the baby. Not yet. He simply nodded. A quiet acknowledgement of the life he helped create, the lives he disrupted, and the man he still had to become. Because this was no longer about custody papers or corporate inheritance. It was about legacy. The kind written not in contracts or magazine covers, but in the moments that shape a child's heart. And that, at last, was something even Bill Spencer couldn't manipulate. There was a particular stillness in the air that morning, an unsettling quiet that made Brooke feel as though the very walls of the Forrester estate were listening. She had lived long enough among whispers, glances, and carefully chosen silences to know when something was wrong. Not just typical wrong, but dangerously, irrevocably wrong. And it was in the silence between Taylor's measured smiles and Deacon's sidelong glances that Brooke began to sense a storm brewing. It wasn't jealousy that stirred her instincts. It was experience. Years of navigating betrayals and alliances had sharpened her perception, and though everyone else seemed content to dismiss her concerns as paranoia, Brooke knew better. Something was being concealed. And whatever it wasn't just scandalous, it was a threat. Brooke had never claimed to be perfect. Her life had been a carousel of love, loss, mistakes, and reinvention. But one constant had remained, her fierce, sometimes flawed, but undeniably real commitment to protecting her family. And now that very instinct was sounding alarms. At first, it was just a series of moments. A hushed conversation that abruptly ended when she entered the room. Taylor's sudden appearances at Il Giardino, always under the pretense of charity or community outreach, but lingering just a little too long in Deacon's proximity. Then came the phone calls, Deacon stepping away mid-sentence, returning pale and tense. Brooke had spent too many years being lied to by men who said all the right things while doing all the wrong ones. And what truly unnerved her was that Taylor, of all people, was part of this duplicity. The rivalry between them had mellowed with age, or so it seemed. They had exchanged tentative truces for the sake of their children, their grandchildren. But trust was something neither woman had ever fully offered the other. Now, watching Taylor's polished facade crack ever so slightly under scrutiny, Brooke realized the past was not as buried as they had pretended. There was something Taylor didn't want seen. And Deacon, charming, complicated Deacon, was either playing a deeper game or had once again allowed himself to become a pawn. Brooke decided to confide in Steffi. She believed the younger woman deserved to know, especially if her mother was involved in something potentially dangerous. But the warning was not well received. Steffi, still raw from years of conflict between Brooke and Taylor, interpreted the concern as sabotage. An old feud rekindled. A jealous ex-wife looking for drama. Her sharp retort cut deep, not just because of its cruelty, but because of the wall it represented. Brooke realized, with painful clarity, that she was now standing alone in her suspicions. Still, she couldn't let it go. The feeling in her gut wouldn't subside. So she watched, listened, waited, and slowly, pieces began to emerge. A security camera glitch at Il Giardino that Deacon dismissed too quickly. A closed-door meeting between Taylor and an unknown investor, someone who, upon closer inspection, had ties to a pharmaceutical firm once linked to Sheila Carter. That name alone would have sent most people running. But not Brooke. Sheila was a ghost that haunted every corner of their lives, no matter how many times she vanished. And Brooke now wondered if Sheila was not only back, but orchestrating something from the shadows. When Brooke confronted Deacon, his reaction sealed it. He didn't deny anything. He simply told her to leave it alone. That was the moment everything shifted. This wasn't just about a relationship. This was about something larger, something dangerous enough that even Deacon, who once claimed to love her, was willing to threaten her into silence. And worse still, Taylor seemed complicit. Brooke didn't know if they were blackmailed, brainwashed, or fully aware of their roles, but she knew she was the only one willing to pull at the thread before the entire fabric unraveled. Days passed. Brooke tried to continue her life as usual, board meetings, family brunches, media events. But everywhere she went, she felt the weight of watching eyes. It wasn't paranoia. Her phone glitched unexpectedly. Her car's GPS rerouted her twice without cause. Once, she returned home to find a photo on her coffee table that she hadn't placed there, an old image of herself and Ridge, one that hadn't seen daylight in years. A message? A warning?
She didn't know.
But the implication was clear. Someone had been in her home. Sheila. Only Sheila had the venom and the reach to orchestrate this kind of psychological game. But to what end? Brooke began to consider that this wasn't just about her. It was about destabilizing the very foundation of the Forrester family. A slow erosion of trust. And she was the first crack being targeted. Still, no one believed her. Ridge was consumed with his own designs, and Steffi had written her off entirely. Hope remained sympathetic, but distant, juggling her own chaos. Brooke was truly, heartbreakingly alone. Yet that isolation became fuel. She began investigating quietly, pulling records, making calls, tracing financial ties. Her instincts led her to a hidden LLC registered to a shell company, funneled through a European account linked to an alias Sheila had once used during her time in Genoa City. That was it. The confirmation. The thread connecting Taylor, Deacon, and Sheila wasn't just theory, it was truth. And it was far more coordinated than she feared. But before she could go public, the threats turned overt. A package arrived at her door. Inside was a single rose, dipped in black dye, and a note. Some legacies are better left buried. Her hands shook as she read it, but her resolve did not. Brooke Logan had been the center of too many scandals to run from this one. If anything, she owed it to every person Sheila had ever harmed to bring the truth into the light. Still, the question tormented her. Why Taylor?
Why now?
What could possibly unite a respected psychiatrist and a former con like Deacon in alliance with someone as toxic as Sheila? The answer came one night, in a file left anonymously on her doorstep. It contained psychological assessments, Taylor's own notes, suggesting experimental behavioral correction therapy. Deacon had been her first subject. And Sheila? The ultimate challenge. Taylor hadn't just allied with Sheila. She had believed she could cure her, redeem her, prove that the monster could be made human. It was an act of arrogance disguised as compassion. And now, it had spiraled beyond her control. Deacon was too deep. Sheila, ever manipulative, had spun the illusion of redemption into a leash. And Brooke had become the threat to that illusion, which meant she had to be neutralized. As the walls closed in, Brooke made her choice. She would not go quietly. She compiled every document, every audio recording, every fragment of evidence she had. And she delivered them not to the press, but to Ridge. If there was one person whose judgment could still shake the family tree, it was him. He didn't speak when she handed him the file. He simply looked at her, wounded, furious, and stunned. Not at her, but at the realization of how blind he had been. The fallout was nuclear. Taylor denied nothing. She admitted to trying to rehabilitate Sheila through Deacon, confessed to allowing herself to believe in a version of redemption that didn't exist. Deacon, once again, stood at a crossroads of betrayal and regret. But it was Sheila who vanished before authorities could arrive. Like smoke. Like always. In the days that followed, Brooke became both hero and pariah. Some praised her for her courage. Others questioned her motives. But she didn't care. The cost had been high, yes, but necessary. She had pulled her family back from the brink of a slow, invisible collapse. And in doing so, she had reminded everyone, herself included, of what true strength looked like. Not in being perfect, not in being adored, but in being brave enough to stand alone, speak truth, and survive the storm.
Oh.